This is one of the hardest shots in disc golf, and today we're going to compare 31 of the straightest putters in disc golf to see which one you should use on a hole like this. Hey everyone, it's Greg from Six Sided Discs. This is Flight Numbers Don't Matter, and today we return to a quest we began over 2 years ago to find the straightest throwing putter. We began by taking a look back at our original test of 28 putters, including the Watt, the Glitch, and many more. In that video, we narrowed it down to our top 5, which included the MVP Glitch, the Trash Panda Inner Core, the MVP Watt, Discmania Logic, and perhaps the biggest surprise of all, the Discmania Sensei. 4 of those are included in today's test, albeit in different plastics. The only one not included today will be the Discmania Sensei, as it has been discontinued. But in addition to the Inner Core, Watt, Logic, and Glitch, we have 27 other allegedly straight putters to put to the test. Josh will be throwing each of them multiple times until we find its straightest flight, and then plot it on our handy-dandy chart here. So without further ado, let's do exactly that. And we'll establish a baseline with our first disc, the Clash Discs Popcorn. The Popcorn is rated at 3301, and it's here today in their Tour Series premium translucent plastic called Sunny. It feels pretty similar to Latitude 64's Optoplastic, slightly flexible with excellent grip. Off the tee, the Popcorn shows us an excellent baseline, with a gentle drift and a very mild fade. It's certainly flirting with straight in my book, but will it end up as the straightest we see today? Let's find out. Up next is one of our top performers from our previous straight putter comparison, the Inner Core. Rated at 2.4, -0.50, the Inner Core was the first disc released by the Mile High manufacturer, Trash Panda Disc Golf. Made from 100% recycled plastic, like all of their discs, this one is made from ground-up cell phone cases. It feels a little bit more flexible than most runs from Trash Panda, but it's still a very familiar feel. Josh found it to have just a touch more understability than like a true neutral straight flight, but it's pretty close. And the flight numbers of -0.5 turn and 0 fade look to be just about bang on. Will our first MVP disc of the day put us any closer to a straight flight? This is the Axiom Pixel. The first disc in the Simon line, the Pixel is a domey, floaty putter rated with 2 speed, 4 glide, 0 turn, and 0.5 fade. Here in their Electron base plastic, despite it being rated a touch overstable, it's actually pretty similar to the Inner Core, just getting this gentlest of drifts to the right, but once again, fairly straight. Next up is a disc that was one of my first putters years ago, the Westside Maiden. Rated at 3401, I was using a base plastic Maiden, but this is anything but. This is their fancy premium tournament ring plastic. Slightly stiff and slightly domey, it has excellent grip and should feel pretty similar to both other premium opaque plastics from Latitude 64 and Dynamic Discs. The Maiden also has a small bead as well, which often adds some overstability. And it certainly adds exactly that today, because compared to our first 3 discs, the Maiden is noticeably more overstable. And that means so far we have a lot less variety than I would expect, mostly straight to slightly understable flights. But there's plenty more where that came from, so let's move on to our first disc from Discraft, the Challenger SS. Rated at 3.3, -1.2, the Challenger SS is far from being the most popular putter in Discraft's lineup. But why? Perhaps it just doesn't get the attention it deserves, with Paul Macbeth's Luna taking the majority of the spotlight, Anthony Barella uses the focus, while many of Team Discraft's pros like the Challenger or Challenger OS. And that makes sense, because many of them, of course, are throwing with quite a bit more power. But for the rest of us, the Challenger SS is very much an option that more players should explore. Without much power, it gets just a very gentle fade, leading to a pretty straight flight. Not the straightest we'll see today, but a solid, affordable option, considering this base plastic typically costs around $13. Another somewhat budget option is the Discmania P1X. Rated at 2300, the P1X is essentially a beaded P1. This is Discmania's stiff P-line plastic. It's a high-quality putting plastic that's durable, but grippy. But this is also where I start to get a little confused. A few weeks ago, we took a look at Trash Panda's new putter, the Outer Core, and it is literally an Inner Core with a bead. And the difference after adding that bead is shocking. It is massively more overstable. So why is the P1X, a beaded version of the P1, rated with the exact same flight numbers as a P1? 2300. I don't get it. I really don't. I just don't get why it's so straight. Right. So just when you think you have it all figured out and you understand how certain changes in design will affect how a disc flies, you get this. A still very straight P1X. Sometimes it's nice to be wrong. Next up is our first of 3 entries from Innova, the iconic Dart. Made famous by Nate Sexton and his long-distance spin putts, it's rated with 3 speed, 4 glide, 0 turn, and 0 fade. And it sounds like a recipe for a pretty straight flight. And we know the Dart well. We've featured it in a Disc in the Details video alongside the Divergent Discs Narwhal. And it's honestly always had just a touch more fade than advertised. Josh throws this star dart out, it gets a brief turn, and then a noticeable fade. And that's going to keep it just outside of that super straight area on our chart. Moving on now to a straight approach putter from Gateway, this is the Shaman. Our Shaman here is in Gateway's Sure Grip plastic, a tacky base blend. And the Shaman is an interesting design. With 3 speed, 3 glide, -1 turn, and 1 fade, it has a low profile, a flat top, and just this small micro bead. And it feels pretty good in both a forehand and a backhand grip. And let's see how it compares to the fairly straight batch of discs we've had so far. Oh my goodness, that's weirdly understable. I asked Josh to throw it again and just kind of back off on the power. But I guess this particular run of Shaman, in this plastic anyways, is just a lot more understable than most. Nowhere near what we're looking for today. Let's pop back to a more traditional putter design with the Doomsday Gloom. This smooth, domey Gloom is in Doomsday's Ration plastic. And the Gloom to me is a dead ringer for an Innova AVR or Discmania P2. But despite the very similar profile, it's rated a bit straighter at 2.3, -1.1. But it turns out it should probably be rated the same as the P2 and AVR at 2.301, because it flies slightly overstable, just like they do. Next up, let's take a look at a disc from the putting specialists at EV7. This is the Yin, with a much more conventional design compared to EV7's Yang, which was released alongside it as an overstable complement. The Yin is a really comfy, rounded design, rated at 1 speed, 4 glide, 0 turn, and 1 fade. And unlike some of the other discs that we've already seen and that we will also be seeing later, it does actually have quite accurate flight numbers, because it is slightly overstable, exactly as advertised. And that brings me to 3 discs that I need to use to help make an important point. These are the Axiom Cosmic Electron Envy and Proxy, as well as the AGL Koa. They're rated at 3.3 -1.2, 3.3 -1.0.5, and 2.301 respectively. And these 3 discs all have the potential to fly straight, as do many of the discs that we're going to see today. But it's all about how they can be made to fly straight and what sort of limitations that puts on you, the player. First, let's see the Envy. On a couple throws, the Envy gets quite a bit of turn. And this would be unusual for a premium plastic Envy, but not that unusual for base plastic runs. But if you want to get a straight flight from this particular Envy, you have to hyzer flip it. Josh drops the power slightly, gets it to flip up from a slight hyzer before it gently fades back. But what we gain here in straightness, we lose in power and distance, as this shot only reaches out to about 220 feet or so. Now, we can accomplish an even straighter flight with the Axiom Proxy, but once again, that's only possible by really dropping the power way, way down. Is it straight? Yes, but once again, we're getting a lot less distance. The AGL Koa is more of the same. At about 70% power from Josh, the Koa turns right over. But if he adds some hyzer and backs off slightly, we can flip it up to straight. The problem with all of this is just how touchy these become. If you don't hit the angle and power perfectly, you're just not going to get that straight flight you're looking for. So we're going to give each of these a little bit of an asterisk on our chart as a reminder that while they can fly straight, that was not the whole story. Next, let's take a look at a couple brands that you maybe haven't heard of, beginning with the Third Coast discs Swell. Third Coast is a new manufacturer making rubber discs down on the Gulf Coast. They rate their flexibility with more precision than many manufacturers, using the durometer scale. For more information on what that means, check out our first impressions video about Third Coast and ozone discs. The link is in the video description. The Swell is rated at 3300, and it comes by those flight numbers quite honestly. For both Josh and myself, it was very, very straight. And that's a really impressive entry from a new company. Another small brand you may not know is Sci-Fly Discs and their putter, the Sputnik. It has some of the funkiest flight numbers around: 2.25 speed, 3.14 glide, negative 0.25 turn, and 1 fade. And you may also have noticed that it's 3D printed, which makes it quite a bit different to most of the discs we're looking at today. But its flight is also a bit different because these flight numbers are spot on. The Sputnik is just slightly, but reliably, overstable. Let's move on to more familiar territory with our last two putters from Innova, the Nova and the XD. Rated at 2300 and 34-11 respectively, these putters have been around for a while. While the Sputnik and Swell both released in the last year or so, the Nova was approved by the PDGA back in 2013, while the XD celebrated its 40th anniversary in 2024. The Nova is one of only a handful of Innova discs with an overmold, typically available in XT plastic, and it's a funky design, but you shouldn't knock it until you try it. Because while it can get some turn, it's also not that hard to throw straight. On the flip side, the XD is surprisingly overstable. It just gets a consistent fade on every shot. So some positives and negatives from Innova today, but overall, a few straight flights for sure. Before we dive into the second half of our discs, I want to remind you to come see us at the Disc Golf Expos. We'll be at Disc East in Marlborough, Massachusetts, January 24th and 25th, as well as Disc South in Allen, Texas, March 7th and 8th. We'll have custom stamped discs, apparel, accessories, and some surprises as well, so we hope to see you there. Back with the putters now, and while the stiff rubber Swell set the bar really high for rubber discs, we haven't had a lot of success with them on our channel. Both Caleb and myself have found really floppy, grippy rubber discs to be kind of hard to throw. And well, it turns out Josh isn't doing much better.
You can't.
I can't do it. I just can't do it.
You've never thrown anything higher. It's so funny.
Things suck.
Because this is the fairly straight rated Elevation Koi in their Glow G plastic with flight numbers of 34, -10. And it should be able to fly pretty straight. In fact, I know that it can. But for Josh, it does not. Much like Caleb and I before, the rubber proves a real challenge if you aren't used to how grippy it is. So again, the Koi probably needs an asterisk. It can fly straight, it just wasn't happening today. Next up, we have a couple pairs of discs to look at, and we'll begin with our pair of MVP putters, the Pilot and Watt. Both in Electron plastic, the Streamline Pilot and MVP Watt have featured in this series before with mixed success. The Pilot wasn't all that straight, while the Eclipse Watt very much was. However, today, with two base plastic versions, will our results look any different? Well, first up, the Pilot was surprisingly beefy. especially for a base plastic putter, while the watt was surprisingly the exact opposite, more what we might expect from a base plastic putter. Neither of these really lived up to expectations, so best we move on to our next pair. From the Stokely family of brands, the Stokely Wren and the Ching Discs Juju. Another duo that's featured on our channel in the past, there's plenty to like about both of these discs. The plastics feel great, the contours on the Juju either help or at least don't get in the way based on our past experience. But are they straight? Well, once again, it's kind of a mixed bag for these two. The Juju has just a touch of turn to it the whole way through, while the Wren is really overstable. Neither of these are what we're looking for today, but what about a pair from Discraft's factory? This is the Champ from Climo Discs and the Luna from Discraft. The Champ was a no-brainer to include in today's test. It's rated at 2300, and in their new premium Victory Line plastic, it should be a good contender. The Luna, though, might seem like an odd inclusion, but frankly that's because the Luna is just kind of an odd disc. Originally released with flight numbers of 3303, it has never flown anywhere close to that. In fact, in many cases, it's hard to argue that the Luna is overstable. But Discraft did recently update the flight numbers to 3402, which are still probably a bit wrong. Either way, regardless of the flight numbers, it's actually a very straight putter. Or is it? Well, this Big Z version we're using today is probably one of the straightest. It turns ever so slightly, beginning to push straight about 2/3 of the way through the flight, for what ends up being a very straight shot. But the Champ was a completely different story. For Josh today, it was outrageously overstable, especially for a disc rated with 0 turn and 0 fade. And this is actually pretty consistent with how the Champ flew for us when we tested the base plastic version about a year ago. But we're about due for some discs that might actually fly straight, so let's take a look at the MVP glitch. You know it, you love it, or hate it, that's how these types of discs tend to go. But today the question isn't so much how straight this one-speed disc is, with 7 glide, 0 turn, and 0 fade, but rather how straight is this specific glitch. We've thrown just about every version of the glitch, from the Special Edition Neutron Soft, stock versions, Eclipse Gyropalooza, Proton Soft, OTB Open version, and more. But today we just have this random purple lab second glitch. So are all glitches created equal? No, they are not. This one has all the glide you know and love, but it's just not that straight, mostly getting a big turn on every shot. Josh was able to eventually get a mostly straight shot, but once again, that's after really dropping the power, adding a lot of hyzer, and that's just not quite what we're looking for today. Next, let's take a quick look at when flight numbers don't quite matter, the Prodigy PA4. I'm a big fan of Prodigy's putter lineup. I think the PA3 feels great, the PA5 is fun and easy to throw, but the PA4 is just this little identity crisis dressed as a disc. The flight numbers of 34, -11 are nowhere close to how understable this thing actually flies. Yep, that's just way more turn than we're looking for today. Now on to our final 5 discs, and if you've stuck with us this far, thank you very much, and you will hopefully be rewarded with some of the straightest putter flights you've ever seen. Hopefully. First up is the beadless Discmania Lux Vapor Logic, with this super straight flight right here. We also got a really great flight from the Zero Pro Pure from Latitude 64. We threw a pair of Streamline Range in Cosmic Neutron and Eclipse Plastic respectively, and my goodness, they were both super straight. All 4 of those discs were super impressive. and rightly earned spots here, here, and here on our chart. But none of those compare to what is, I think, the most neutral flying disc I've ever seen, the Luftdisk's Hydrogen. Rated at 1200, the Hydrogen is just such a unique disc. It may not be the most comfortable in your hand, and it may fly slow as a brick, but it is so unbelievably straight. Nothing compares to how much the Hydrogen wants to hold the exact angle it's released on. Nothing. When we first looked at the Hydrogen a couple years ago, we found that it just desperately wants to hold exactly the angle you put it on, which ultimately means how straight the Hydrogen flies for you is entirely up to you. So get one and see what you can do. So, how hard is it to find a straight flying putter? Well, not as hard as I thought. We had some great flights today from the Inner Core, from the P1X, the Swell, the Nova, and of course, our top 5. But I think what stands out to me today, compared with our first time looking at straight flying putters, is how much less variety we had. Our first time around seemed to have much bigger outliers, and less discs that were almost straight. While today, we had only a few that were really that far off. Maybe that means manufacturers are getting better at dialing in these flight numbers. Maybe it means we just picked a really great batch of discs today. Or maybe it means we just got lucky and threw them just right today. Either way, congrats to the Logic, Pure, Range, and Hydrogen for flying so straight. What's your favorite straight putter? Let us know in the comments below. And also comment below what tests you'd like to see in the future on Flight Numbers Don't Matter. For Six Sided Discs, I'm Greg. We'll see you in the next one. For more information, while the XD just celebrated its while the Ren is But Discraft did recently update, which ultimately what? Which ultimately means how straight the
Remember to let go. You can't.
I can't do it. I just can't do it.
You've never thrown anything higher.
Thing sucks.
If you like this content and want to see more, please consider liking the video, subscribing to our channel, or becoming a member. Your support makes this content possible.